Single dad saw a crying deaf woman at blind date, unaware she'd lost everything but hope. Before we continue, tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Ethan Cross sat in his truck outside Riverside Bistro at 6:30 on a Saturday evening, staring at his phone like it might explode. And honestly, he was hoping it would, so he'd have an excuse not to go inside. His sister Rachel had been texting him all day with increasingly threatening messages. The latest one reading, "If you bail, I'm telling Mom you're the one who broke her china cabinet in college, not me." And Ethan knew she wasn't playing around because Rachel held grudges, like some people held savings bonds. First date in 3 years. First time sitting across from someone who wasn't his late wife Caroline. First time pretending he was a functional human being instead of just a guy who went to work and came home and repeated the cycle until his 8-year-old daughter Sophie asked him why he never smiled anymore. He took a breath that felt like swallowing glass and got out of the truck before he could talk himself out of it. The bistro looked exactly like it had when Caroline was alive. Same warm lights in the windows. Same river view that she'd loved. Same owner Iris who'd been Caroline's mentor and best friend. And the person who'd held Ethan's hand at the funeral when he couldn't stand up on his own. He pushed through the door, and Iris spotted him immediately, her weathered hands moving in sign language before he'd even reached the hostess stand. "Ethan, it's been months. Where's Sophie?" Ethan signed back, his hands remembering the language Caroline had taught him even when his brain felt foggy. "Home with Rachel. I'm actually here for a date." Iris's whole face transformed, eyes going soft and wet, and she pulled him into a hug that smelled like lavender and bread. Caroline would be so happy, she signed against his shoulder, and Ethan had to blink hard to keep it together, because yeah, Caroline probably would be happy. She'd always said he was too young to spend the rest of his life alone. He headed to the bar to wait, ordered water because his hands were shaking too badly to trust himself with anything else. And that's when he saw her. Woman at the other end of the bar, maybe 3 seats down, with her head in her hands and her shoulders doing that thing people's shoulders do when they are trying not to completely fall apart in public. The bartender looked helpless, clearly wanting to help but not knowing how. And Ethan watched the woman lift her head just enough to wipe her eyes and saw mascara streak down her cheeks like war paint. She pulled out her phone and typed something, showed it to the bartender, and even from where Ethan sat, he could see the bartender's expression shift to that particular kind of uncomfortable that people get when they don't know how to communicate with someone. The bartender grabbed a napkin, wrote something, showed it to the woman, and she nodded and put her head back in her hands. Ethan knew that body language, had seen it 1,000 times in Caroline's students. The way deaf people held themselves when the hearing world was just too damn exhausting. He moved down the bar before his brain could stop him, gently waved his hand in her peripheral vision so she'd know someone was there without being startled. She looked up and her eyes were this incredible brown that was currently swimming in tears, and Ethan's hands moved before he could second-guess himself, forming the signs Caroline had drilled into him until they were muscle memory. "Are you okay? Can I help?" The woman's eyes went huge, her whole body going still like she'd just seen a ghost, and her hands came up slowly, hesitantly, signing back. "You sign?" Her ASL was perfect, fluid, the kind of signing that came from years of practice, and Ethan nodded. "My late wife was a deaf educator. I'm rusty, but yeah, what's wrong?" And just like that, the woman's face crumpled, and she started signing so fast Ethan had to ask her to slow down twice. She told him everything, and it poured out like she'd been holding it in for months and just needed one person to listen. Car accident 6 months ago, traumatic brain injury, woke up in the hospital to complete silence, lost her job as a sign language interpreter because you can't interpret between two languages when you can't hear one of them. Lost her apartment because medical bills ate her savings faster than cancer had eaten Caroline's. Lost her fiancé because apparently some guys think disabled and damaged are the same thing. "I sold my engagement ring today for $200, she signed, and Ethan felt his jaw clench because he knew that ring had probably cost thousands. "I've been living in my car for 2 weeks. My sister forced me to come to this blind date tonight, and I've been sitting here for 20 minutes trying to convince myself to stay, but who's going to want to date a deaf woman who literally has nothing left?" Ethan signed back without hesitation. "Someone who sees that you're still standing." That's not nothing. She stared at him like he just said something in a foreign language, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and signed. Why are you being so nice to me? You don't even know me. Ethan's chest tightened because he did know her, knew her in the way you know anyone who's been broken by circumstances they didn't choose and are trying to figure out how to keep breathing anyway. My wife used to say the deaf community takes care of each other, he signed. She'd haunt me from heaven if I walked away from someone who needed help. The woman actually laughed, this small broken sound that turned into a sob halfway through, and signed. Your wife sounds like she was amazing. Ethan's hands moved carefully, forming the words that still hurt 3 years later. She was. They talked for 30 minutes, him telling her about Caroline's cancer and the 2 years of treatments that didn't work, and the 5-year-old daughter he'd been left to raise alone. Her telling him about her decade as an interpreter and how she'd loved it, and how losing her hearing felt like losing her identity. Ethan checked his watch at one point, saw it was 7:05 and his date was officially late, and the woman checked hers too and made a face like she was relieved hers hadn't shown up either. The hostess appeared beside them looking apologetic and slightly confused. Mr. Cross, your table's ready. Is your date here yet? Ethan shook his head, opened his mouth to say he'd wait a few more minutes, when the hostess turned to the woman and started signing. And you must be Maya? Your date, Ethan texted, he's here waiting for you. The world kind of tilted sideways in that moment, like someone had picked up the bar and shaken it, and Ethan watched the woman's hands freeze mid-sign and her eyes go wide in disbelieving. She looked at him, really looked at him, and signed so slowly each word was its own sentence. You're Ethan, the blind date? Ethan's brain was several steps behind, trying to catch up, and he signed back just as slowly. You're Maya, the interpreter my sister set me up with? They stared at each other for what felt like an hour, but was probably 5 seconds. And then they both started laughing, actually laughing. The kind of laughter that comes when the universe does something so absurd, you either laugh or cry, and laughing seems like the better option. The hostess stood there looking back and forth between them, like she was watching a tennis match. You two already know each other? Ethan was still laughing when he signed. We just met 30 minutes ago, at the bar. I had no idea she was you. Maya's hands were shaking when she signed back. I was crying and he stopped to help, and I never asked his name. And oh my God, this is the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me. The hostess grinned like she just witnessed the best meet cute in history. Well, this is definitely a first. Your table's ready whenever you are. They followed her to a booth by the window, river view, soft lighting, and Maya signed. I'm so sorry, my profile is old, from before the accident. I should have mentioned I'm deaf now. Ethan signed back. I'm not sorry. If I'd known, I would have been too nervous to come. They sat down and Iris appeared out of nowhere the way she always did, her hands moving in excited signs. Ethan, is this your date? Ethan nodded and Iris turned to Maya, studying her face with this intense concentration that made Ethan nervous. Have we met before? You look so familiar. Maya signed her full name slowly. Maya Brennan. And Iris's face just crumbled, hands flying to her mouth, eyes filling with tears. Little Maya? Caroline's student? The hearing girl who wanted to be an interpreter? Everything stopped. Maya's hands froze, her face going white, and she signed. Miss Iris, from the ASL classes? Oh my God! They hugged right there in the middle of the restaurant, both of them crying, and Ethan sat there feeling like he just walked into the middle of a movie he hadn't been watching. When they finally pulled apart, Iris was signing so fast Ethan could barely follow. Caroline taught you 12 years ago in my advanced class. You were 20 years old and so determined. Maya turned to Ethan, tears streaming down her face. Your wife taught me? Caroline was your wife. Ethan could only nod because his throat had stopped working somewhere around the time Iris said Caroline's name. Maya's neck signs were shaky, broken. She's the reason I became an interpreter. She told me I had a gift. She changed my entire life. Iris disappeared and came back 5 minutes later carrying a worn leather journal that Ethan recognized immediately as one of Caroline's. She opened it to a page marked with a pressed lavender stem and slid it across the table. Ethan read his late wife's handwriting through a blur of tears. Met a girl named Maya today. She wants to build bridges between worlds. If I ever have a daughter, I hope she's like this. Ethan, if you're reading this, find the bridge builders. They'll remind you there's beauty and connection even when words fail. Maya was sobbing into her hands and Ethan was crying, and Iris was crying, and probably half the restaurant was staring, but none of it mattered because Caroline had known. Somehow she'd known, and she'd left them breadcrumbs to find each other. Ethan reached across the table and took Maya's hands and signed. "This is the worst first date ever." Maya laughed through her tears. "The absolute worst." Ethan stood up, walked around the table, offered his hand. "Want to start over?" Maya looked up at him with those brown eyes that had seen too much loss and still had hope left in them, and she took his hand and stood. Ethan signed with his free hand. "Hi, I'm Ethan Cross. I'm a single dad, I'm terrified of dating, and I think my late wife just played matchmaker from heaven. Can I buy you dinner?" Maya signed back. "I'm Maya Brennan. I lost everything 6 months ago except my ability to hope. I'd love dinner." They talked for 3 hours straight, hands moving in sign language while Iris kept refilling their water and pretending she wasn't watching them fall for each other in real time. Maya told Ethan about the students she'd interpreted for, the court cases and hospital visits and graduations where she'd been the bridge between worlds. Ethan told her about Caroline's last days, how she'd made him promise not to stop living after she was gone, and how he'd broken that promise until tonight. Iris finally kicked them out at 10 p.m. with a knowing smile and 2 slices of lavender panna cotta wrap to go. They stood in the parking lot, and Ethan walked Maya to her car. Didn't think anything of it until he saw the back seat piled with clothes and blankets and everything that screamed someone's been sleeping here. His stomach dropped and he signed before he could stop himself. "You're still living in your car." Maya's face went red, even in the parking lot lights, and she signed back defensive and embarrassed. "Just until I figure something out, I'm fine, really." Ethan shook his head. "My sister Rachel has a guest house. Been trying to rent it for months. It's just sitting there empty." Maya's hands moved sharp. "I can't pay rent. I told you I have nothing." Ethan signed firmly. "Then don't pay. Just be safe, please. I can't let you sleep in your car, knowing I could help." They argued for 10 minutes, Maya insisting she didn't need charity and Ethan insisting it wasn't charity, it was just human decency. And finally Maya gave in, because honestly, she was so tired of being cold at night and scared every time headlights swept past her windows. Ethan drove her to Rachel's property, showed her the little guest house with its lock and its shower and its actual bed, and Maya stood in the middle of the tiny living room and just broke down sobbing. "Thank you," she signed when she could finally breathe again. "I don't know how to repay you," Ethan signed back. "You don't have to. Just get some rest." He hesitated at the door, turned back, signed one more thing. "Breakfast tomorrow? I want to introduce you to Sophie properly." Maya nodded, smiling through tears, and after he left, she locked the door and stood there for 5 full minutes, just feeling safe for the first time in weeks. And maybe, just maybe, Caroline had been right about bridge builders after all. Maya Brennan woke up the next morning in an actual bed for the first time in 2 weeks, and honestly couldn't remember the last time she'd slept without one eye open, listening for cops or parking lot security telling her to move her car. Ethan had brought her to his sister Rachel's property the night before, shown her this little guest house that was small but clean and had a lock on the door and a shower that worked, and Maya had cried so hard she'd given herself a headache because kindness after months of nothing but doors slamming in your face will absolutely wreck you. Rachel showed up at 9 in the morning with groceries and signed like she'd been doing it her whole life. "Stay as long as you need. Seriously, I've been trying to rent this place for months anyway, and it's just sitting here empty." Maya tried to protest, tried to say she couldn't accept this much help from people she barely knew, but Rachel just shook her head. Caroline would have done the same thing. Probably would have moved you into her own house within an hour of meeting you. So really, you're getting off easy. The front door burst open and an 8-year-old tornado named Sophie came flying in, all blonde curls and missing front teeth, and hands already moving in sign language. "Daddy said you're staying here. Are you really deaf like mommy's students? Can I teach you stuff? I'm really good at teaching." Maya signed back that yes, she was new to being deaf and still learning, and Sophie's whole face lit up like Christmas morning. I can help. Mommy taught me how to teach before she went to heaven. The first week turned into two, and Maya found herself with a routine for the first time since the accident. Sophie showing up every day after school with her backpack and her enthusiasm and her complete lack of filter. The kid taught her how to feel music through vibrations by putting Maya's hand on a speaker, how to set up visual alerts on her phone for doorbells and alarms, how to sign slang that definitely wasn't in any textbook Maya had ever studied. And Ethan would watch from a distance, leaning against door frames with his arms crossed and this expression on his face that Maya caught sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking. One week turned into a month, and Ethan brought coffee one morning, sat down across from Maya at the tiny kitchen table in the guest house, and signed. What made you choose interpreting? Like before everything, what drew you to it? Maya explained about being a music major in college, about seeing an ASL interpreter performing a song at a concert and thinking it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Music made visible, communication as art. Ethan got this look on his face, the one he got when he was problem solving, and signed. My architecture firm is designing a community center. They need an accessibility consultant, someone who understands deaf and hard of hearing needs from the inside. Maya's hand stuttered mid-sign. I'm not qualified for that. Ethan signed back firmly. You're more qualified than anyone. You've lived both sides, hearing and deaf. You know what works and what doesn't. 2 days later, Maya was sitting in a conference room with Ethan's boss, David, presenting ideas she'd spent 48 hours researching, visual alert systems and acoustic considerations, and open floor plans that didn't block sight lines for visual communication. And when David signed the contract for $5,000, Maya nearly passed out right there, because that was more money than she'd seen in 6 months. First real money she'd made since losing everything. First time in months she felt like maybe she was worth something after all. 4 months slid by faster than Maya expected, and somewhere in there she stopped being the broken woman Ethan had found crying at a bar and started being someone who laughed at dinner and taught Sophie how to braid hair and fell asleep on Ethan's couch during movie nights with captions on. Ethan held her hand during the scary parts, even though Maya couldn't hear the suspenseful music. And one night when Sophie was asleep in her room, he signed against Maya's palm in the dark. I love you, Maya signed back. I love you too. And they both cried because neither of them had thought they'd get to say those words again. Sophie cornered Ethan one Saturday morning with that expression she got when she'd already made up her mind about something and was just waiting for the adults to catch up. Can Miss Maya come to the mother-daughter dance at school? I don't have a mommy to bring, and Maya's nice and she won't feel weird because she can sign and all the other moms can hear. Ethan's heart cracked wide open right there in the kitchen. That's really thoughtful, sweetheart, but we should ask her first. The night of the dance, Maya showed up in a simple blue dress, looking nervous as hell, and Sophie was wearing lavender because it had been Caroline's favorite color. And when some nosy mom asked if Maya was Sophie's stepmom, the kid announced to everyone in signing and speaking distance, "She's my dad's girlfriend." Except they hadn't actually had that conversation yet, hadn't put labels on whatever this was they were building, and Maya and Ethan both froze like deer in headlights. They sat in Ethan's truck outside the guest house after the dance, the silence stretching between them like taffy, and finally Maya signed. Do you want me to be your girlfriend? Ethan's hands stumbled over themselves, trying to form words. I don't know how to do this. It's been 3 years and you're going through so much already, Maya signed back. What if I want you to? And Ethan leaned across the console, hesitated just long enough to ask permission with his eyes, and when Maya nodded, he kissed her like she was oxygen, and he'd been drowning. 6 more months of building something real. Sunday dinners at Riverside Bistro, where Iris always gave them Caroline's old booth. Sophie falling asleep between them during movies. Ethan learning tactile sign for when it was too dark for Maya to see his hands. And then the letter came. Certification board rejecting Maya's application to become a certified deaf interpreter. Some outdated rule about needing to hear to interpret. And Maya locked herself in the guest house for 2 days straight. Sophie stood outside with a poster board sign that read, "We love you, please come out," while Ethan held one that said, "You're not broken, the system is." And when Maya finally opened the door with mascara everywhere and eyes swollen from crying, Sophie launched herself at Maya's legs. Ethan signed. "You don't need their permission to be extraordinary," Maya signed back. "I just wanted my old life back." Ethan pulled her close. "I know, but maybe your new life is better. Just different." 1 week later, Maya got an email that made her run to Ethan's house without knocking for the first time ever. Found him cooking dinner with Sophie doing homework at the table, and her hands were shaking so badly she could barely sign. "I got a job offer. The community center wants me full-time as accessibility director, 65,000 a year with benefits." They danced in the kitchen with Sophie giggling, and that night after the kid was asleep, Maya and Ethan sat on the porch and she signed. "I'm ready to move out of the guest house." Ethan's face fell so fast Maya almost laughed, and she signed quickly before he could spiral. "Into your house, with you and Sophie, if you want that." Ethan's hands were shaking when he signed back. "Are you sure?" Maya had never been more sure of anything in her life, signed exactly that, and Ethan kissed her and signed against her lips. "Move in this weekend. Move in right now. I don't care. Just stay." Maya moved her belongings into Ethan's house the next weekend. And honestly, it took about 20 minutes because she still didn't own much beyond clothes and the laptop she'd managed to keep through everything. Sophie gave her the grand tour like she was showing off a mansion instead of a 3-bedroom rental. And when they got to the closed door at the end of the hall, Sophie signed carefully. "This was Mommy's office. Daddy hasn't touched it since she died. Maybe you could use it?" Maya opened the door to find 3 years of dust covering books about deaf education and ASL materials and framed photos of Caroline with students, and there was this weight in the air, like the room itself was holding its breath. Ethan appeared in the doorway, looking like he wanted to run. "I couldn't pack it up. I tried a dozen times and just couldn't." Maya signed back. "Can I help you now?" And they spent the whole afternoon sorting through Caroline's life, keeping the meaningful stuff and boxing up teaching materials to donate to Iris's program. 6 months of domestic bliss that Maya never thought she'd get to have, making breakfast while Ethan got Sophie ready for school, coming home to a house that felt like home instead of just a place to sleep. Movie nights where Sophie fell asleep between them, and they'd carry her to bed together like actual parents. But Maya still had moments where the grief for her old life would hit her sideways. Panic attacks in grocery stores when the sensory overload got too much. Days where being deaf felt like being trapped behind glass watching everyone else live. The 1-year anniversary of their disastrous first date was coming up and Ethan was planning something. Maya could tell by the way he kept having hushed conversations with Iris and how Sophie could barely contain her excitement every time Maya walked into a room. But then Maya was at a coffee shop waiting for her order, and she read the lips of 2 women at the next table over. "Did you hear about Ethan Cross? Dating a deaf girl now. So sad," the other woman responded. "His wife was deaf too. He probably just has a type." Maya spiraled hard after that, the old insecurities coming back with a vengeance. Am I just Caroline 2.0? Am I just filling a dead woman's shoes? Does he even see me, or does he just see her? She canceled their anniversary dinner, claiming she felt sick and locked herself in their bedroom. And when Ethan finally confronted her, she signed angry and fast. Am I just a replacement for Caroline, the deaf girl who needed saving? Ethan looked like she'd slapped him. Where is this coming from? Maya signed back. People talk. They think you have a type, that I'm just filling her space in your life. Ethan's hands moved sharp and frustrated. You're nothing like Caroline. She was confident. You second-guess everything. She was extroverted. You're quiet. You're completely different people. Maya's signs were shaking. Then why do you love me? Ethan dropped to his knees in front of where she sat on the bed, his hands moving slowly and deliberately. Because you make Sophie laugh in ways she hasn't since her mom died. Because you see beauty in broken things. Because you didn't give up when you lost everything. Because when I'm with you, I'm not stuck in the past. I'm building a future. Maya collapsed forward into his arms and they held each other while she cried out 3 years of grief and fear and finally believing she was worth loving. The anniversary dinner happened 3 days later. Same booth at Riverside Bistro, same time 7 p.m., and Iris had decorated with lavender flowers that made Maya's throat tight. After dinner, Ethan stood up and his hands were shaking when he signed. 1 year ago, I walked in here thinking I was meeting a stranger. Instead, I met my future. Maya's eyes went wide because she knew exactly what was happening, and her heart was trying to pound its way out of her chest. Ethan got on one knee right there in the middle of the restaurant, and Sophie came running out from the kitchen where Iris had been hiding her, holding a poster board that read, "Will you marry us?" in rainbow markers. Ethan signed with one hand while the other pulled out a ring. Maya Brennan, will you marry me? Will you be Sophie's mom? Will you build a life with us? Maya was crying and signing yes over and over, and the whole restaurant erupted in applause, hands waving in the air in the deaf community's version of cheering. 6 months later, they got married at Riverside Bistro, with Iris officiating in ASL, and the ceremony was entirely visual. Performers signing songs instead of singing them. All the guests learning basic signs to participate. Sophie wore lavender and walked down the aisle, throwing flowers like her life depended on it. And when Maya appeared in her simple white dress, Ethan started crying before she'd taken 3 steps. His vows were signed with shaking hands. Maya, you showed Sophie what strength looks like and showed me what second chances feel like. Caroline led me to you, but you made me stay. I promise to sign to you every day, even when we're old and our hands shake. I love you in 2 languages, but mostly I love you in the language that needs no words. Maya signed back. You didn't save me that night. You gave me space to save myself. You loved me broken and waited while I healed. I choose you both forever. 3 years later, they were back at Riverside Bistro for Sunday brunch. Maya pregnant with their second kid, Sophie 11 years old and teaching their 18-month-old son Charlie his first signs, even though he was born with hearing loss and wore tiny hearing aids. Sophie signed to him patiently. This is a sign for Mama, can you try? And Charlie's little hands formed the sign, and Maya cried happy tears because she never thought she'd get this family, this love, this life. Iris brought lavender panna cotta to their table. On the house, as always, for my favorite family. Sophie grinned. Tell the story again about how you and Dad met. Maya signed. Your dad found me on the worst night of my life. Ethan signed back. No, you found me. And they held hands across the table while their kids destroyed pancakes and made a mess. And on the wall, Caroline's photo smiled down from the memorial wall, surrounded by pictures of the family they'd built. Sometimes the worst nights lead to the best mornings. Sometimes losing everything means you have room to build something better. Sometimes the person who helps you isn't saving you. They're just holding space while you save yourself. Ethan didn't rescue Maya that night at the bar. He just saw her, really saw her, and sometimes being seen is all we need to remember we're worth loving. If this story reminded you that second chances are real, that broken doesn't mean worthless, and that love finds you when you stop looking, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear their story isn't over yet. Thanks for being here with us.